The courtroom was suffocatingly still, every eye fixed on the confrontation at the witness stand. Officer Derek Shaw leaned heavily over the polished oak, his voice thick with venom and unchecked arrogance as it echoed off the high ceilings. "You think you're smart, don't you? You're nothing. Just another criminal trying to game the system to save your own skin." Elena Vargas stood dead center in the room, her hands trembling ever so slightly against the seams of her skirt, yet her eyes locked onto his with an icy, unyielding glare. "I'm not playing a game, Officer Shaw," she whispered, her voice steady and sharp as a scalpel slicing through the silence. "I'm just finishing the one you started." Seconds later, she reached for the single piece of irrefutable evidence he had believed was lost forever in the dark. It had begun on a rain-slicked night along the interstate outside Chicago. Elena Vargas, a determined young paralegal working exhausting hours to fund her night classes at Loyola University, Chicago School of Law, gripped the worn steering wheel of her car. Her knuckles were white with fatigue, her mind dulled by endless drafts of legal documents and the dry weight of corporate case law. She longed only for the quiet of her small apartment and whatever rest she could steal before another relentless day began. Without warning, the rearview mirror exploded with blinding red and blue lights. The strobing glare painted the interior of her car in violent crimson and sapphire. Her stomach dropped. She checked her speed, her signals, her seatbelt. Everything was in order. Still, a knot of anxiety tightened in her throat as she eased onto the muddy shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires. She rolled down the window, the freezing rain instantly biting at her cheek, and placed both hands firmly on the steering wheel, where they could be clearly seen. Heavy footsteps approached through the downpour. A high-powered flashlight beam cut through the darkness, blinding her for a moment before dropping to her pale, exhausted face. "License, registration, and proof of insurance, now!" She forced her voice to remain calm. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over?" Officer Derek Shaw leaned in, thick forearms resting aggressively on the wet doorframe, invading her space. He was a massive man, his dark uniform stretched tight across his broad chest, a contemptuous smirk playing on his lips. A veteran who had long operated under the absolute conviction that his badge was a blank check for unchecked authority. He thrived on the fear he inspired in others. "You were swerving back there. Looked like a DUI to me," he lied without hesitation, rain dripping from the brim of his cap onto her door. Elena frowned, her legal instincts sharpening. "I wasn't swerving, officer. The road is slick, but I maintained my lane the entire time. I haven't had anything to drink." His eyes narrowed. He despised pushback, especially from a young woman who met his gaze without the trembling fear he believed he was owed. "Are you arguing with me, little girl?" "I'm stating a fact," she replied, respectful but firm. Slowly, she reached for the glove box. "I'm getting my registration now." "Get out of the car," he snapped, his hand dropping to the heavy flashlight holstered on his belt. "Excuse me? On what grounds? I haven't done anything wrong. You have no probable cause to order me out of the vehicle." "I said get out of the damn car," he roared. He yanked the door handle. It was locked. Enraged, he slammed the heavy metal base of his flashlight against the glass, spiderwebbing the reinforced window with a sickening crack. "Step out, or I'm dragging you out for resisting a lawful order." Panic flared hot in her chest, yet her rigorous legal training overrode the instinct to fight. Comply now. Survive the encounter. Fight it later in court. She unlocked the door and stepped into the freezing downpour. Before her feet were fully planted, he spun her around with terrifying force and slammed her chest against the icy metal roof of her car. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. He kicked her legs apart roughly, patting her down with an aggression that crossed far beyond standard protocol into pure punitive assault. "What are you doing?" she cried, her cheek pressed agonizingly against the freezing roof, rain plastering her hair to her face. "Shut up," he hissed into her ear, his breath hot against her skin. He reached into a deep pocket of his tactical vest, his large hand deliberately obscuring the lens of his body camera for a fraction of a second. Then, as if by miracle, he produced a small, clear plastic baggie wedged deep between the driver's seat and center console. "Well, well, well," he sneered, holding the baggie filled with white, crystalline substance under the harsh beam of his flashlight. "Looks like we have possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. You're going away for a long time, sweetheart." "That's not mine. You planted that!" she screamed, the nightmarish injustice ripping the air from her lungs. Tears of frustration and terror stung her eyes. He only laughed, a cruel, hollow, victorious sound, swallowed instantly by the storm. He grabbed her wrists and ratcheted the cold steel handcuffs so tightly they bit into her skin and cut off circulation. "Tell it to the judge. Not that anyone in this city is going to believe a word you say over me." What followed was a living nightmare. She was processed through the cold machinery of the county jail, stripped of her clothing, her dignity, and her identity, forced into an abrasive orange jumpsuit, and thrown into a freezing holding cell that reeked of bleach and despair. The official charges were devastating: felony possession of methamphetamine, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. A calculated fabrication claiming she had scratched his forearm. Thanks to her completely clean record and the swift intervention of her boss, seasoned defense attorney Marcus Ellison, who personally posted her bail, she was released. But her life lay in ruins. She was immediately suspended from her paralegal position, and her law school admission was placed on administrative hold. Officer Shaw had detonated a bomb in the center of her meticulously planned future simply because she had refused to cower before his fragile ego. Sitting at her scratched kitchen table, staring at the crumpled citation, Elena felt a wave of crushing despair threaten to pull her under. It was her word against a decorated veteran of the force. The system was not broken. It had been designed to function exactly this way, to protect men like him and crush people like her. Yet Elena Vargas was no ordinary victim. She spent her days analyzing case law and dissecting forensic evidence. She opened her laptop and logged into the public court records system, a cold, calculating fury driving her forward. If Shaw was comfortable staging something like this on a complete stranger in the dead of night, he had undoubtedly done it before. For weeks she barely slept, surviving on black coffee, cold toast, and pure spite. She built massive color-coded spreadsheets, cross-referencing every arrest he had made. She filed numerous Freedom of Information Act requests for his internal affairs complaints, use of force reports, and mysteriously dismissed cases. The pattern that emerged was sickeningly clear. Throughout his career, he had accumulated numerous complaints for excessive force, racial profiling, and evidence tampering. Every single one had been quietly swept under the rug by union representatives or dismissed by internal affairs for lack of corroborating evidence. He was a predator who specifically targeted the vulnerable: late-night workers, minorities, people who could not afford high-priced lawyers to fight back. He had believed Elena was just another easy target to boost his arrest numbers. He had no idea he had pulled over a legal mind in training. One evening, while reviewing the police report for the 100th time, she noticed a seemingly insignificant detail: the arrest location on the northbound interstate shoulder beside an abandoned rest stop. Her pulse quickened. She drove back to the exact spot in daylight, parked, and studied the geometry of the space. Just beyond the rusted guardrail sat an old, fenced-in commercial trucking way station. Following the lines of the utility poles, she spotted a discreet but active CCTV security camera mounted on the highest light pole, offering a perfect, unobstructed bird's-eye view of the highway shoulder. It belonged to the state's transportation department. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Shaw had never looked up. In his arrogance, he had believed he was operating entirely in the dark. After months of relentless preparation, the day of trial arrived. The air inside the courtroom was thick and oppressive, smelling faintly of lemon floor wax, old varnished wood, and the nervous sweat of desperate defendants. Judge Harlan Pierce, a stern jurist with a well-known reputation for leaning heavily in favor of law enforcement, presided from the elevated bench. Elena sat stiffly at the defense table. Marcus Ellison had offered to represent her pro bono, but she had insisted on leading the defense herself, with him serving strictly as co-counsel to handle objections. If she was going to reclaim her life and clear her name, she needed to be the one to look Shaw in the eye and tear his lies apart on the record. The prosecution called their star witness. Officer Derek Shaw swaggered into the courtroom, uniform impeccably pressed, brass buttons polished to a blinding shine. He exuded an aura of untouchable arrogance. As he passed the defense table, he shot Elena a barely perceptible, deeply mocking wink. Under direct examination, he proved a masterful actor, painting a vivid picture of danger and heroism. He described her supposedly erratic behavior, her violent resistance, and the moment he discovered the narcotics in her hand as she lunged at him. When asked about his body camera, he sighed with appropriate frustration. A tragic technical failure caused by the extreme moisture of the heavy rain. The jury, composed mostly of older middle-class citizens who fundamentally trusted the uniform, nodded along sympathetically. "Thank you, officer. No further questions." Judge Pierce looked down. "Cross-examination, Ms. Vargas?" Elena stood slowly. She smoothed the front of her tailored charcoal gray suit, drew a centering breath, and walked to the podium. The courtroom fell utterly silent. "Officer Shaw," she began, her voice calm and projecting perfectly across the room. "You testified today that I lunged at you, that I was physically violent. Is that correct?" "That is correct," he replied, leaning back comfortably, arms crossed over his chest. "And you testified that you found the narcotics directly in my hand, as I was actively trying to conceal them from you. Correct?" "Yes, you were trying to stuff them down the front of your shirt." Elena picked up a pristine copy of his official sworn police report and approached the stand. "Officer Shaw, could you please read paragraph 4 of your own sworn report to the court, the report you filed mere hours after the incident?" He read it silently, a microscopic tightening visible in his jaw. "Aloud, please, officer," she commanded. The suspect was extracted from the vehicle. During a standard pat-down search for weapons, a plastic baggie containing a white crystalline substance was discovered, wedged between the driver's seat and the center console. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. "So which was it, officer?" Elena asked, maintaining unbroken eye contact. "Was the baggie in my hand as I violently lunged at you? Or was it wedged deep in the center console while I was already standing outside the car?" Shaw's face flushed a deep, angry crimson. The situation on the side of the highway was chaotic and fast-moving. Both things happened in rapid succession. The written report is a brief summary. My testimony today is the complete, holistic truth. "I see," she said smoothly, turning to face the jury. "So your memory of a chaotic event months later is remarkably more accurate than the sworn official report you filed shortly after it happened." "I know what I saw," he snapped, his polished facade beginning to crack. Elena paced slowly back to the defense table, letting the silence stretch. "Yes, the audio. The audio where you are screaming, 'Stop resisting,' at the top of your lungs, while my voice cannot be heard, making a single sound. Tell me, Officer Shaw, when your body camera so conveniently shorted out, did you also manually rotate your cruiser's dash cam to ensure my car and your actions were entirely out of the visual frame. Objection! The prosecutor shouted. Speculation! Counsel is testifying and harassing the witness. Sustained, Judge Pierce said sharply. Though he was now leaning far forward, eyes narrowed suspiciously at Shaw. Ms. Vargas, stick to the facts currently in evidence. Of course, Your Honor. Elena reached into her briefcase and lifted a small black USB flash drive. It felt heavier than a brick in her palm. Officer Shaw, are you familiar with the State Transportation Department's traffic and commercial way station monitoring systems? Shaw's confident posture stiffened as if struck. Color drained from his face with terrifying speed, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. His eyes darted frantically from her face to the tiny drive in her hand. I am broadly aware they exist, he stammered. Would you be surprised to learn that directly adjacent to the exact location where you pulled me over is an active high-definition surveillance camera operated by the State Transportation Department, one that records 24 hours a day regardless of weather? Objection, Your Honor! The defense has not introduced any such video evidence during formal discovery. Marcus Ellison rose smoothly. Your Honor, the defense subpoenaed the footage immediately upon learning of its existence through independent investigation. We provided a certified digital copy to the district attorney's office this morning as supplemental exculpatory evidence under the mandatory Brady rule. If counsel has not checked her email, that is an administrative failure, not the fault of the defense. Judge Pierce looked down furiously at the prosecutor, who was frantically whispering to her paralegal. The paralegal checked a tablet, went pale, and nodded miserably. The evidence is admitted, the judge ruled, voice ringing with authority. Proceed, Ms. Vargas. Let's see this video. The fluorescent lights dimmed. Elena plugged in the drive. A massive projection screen lowered silently behind the witness stand, hanging directly above Shaw's sweating head. The video crackled to life in stunning high-definition resolution. The sophisticated camera cut through the darkness and heavy rain, illuminating the highway shoulder like a stage. The digital timestamp confirmed the precise moment of the stop. The entire courtroom watched in breathless silence as Elena's car pulled over into frame, followed immediately by Shaw's cruiser. She froze the image. Let the record reflect that the cruiser's dash cam is pointing straight ahead, intentionally missing my vehicle entirely. She hit play again. The footage showed Shaw walking up to the car, violently yanking the door handle, then smashing his heavy flashlight against the window, shattering the glass inward. Loud gasps echoed through the gallery. Several jurors recoiled in horror. The video continued mercilessly. It showed him dragging Elena out by her arm and hair, slamming her violently against the roof, an entirely unprovoked assault. She was clearly compliant, going limp with terror. Then came the damning sequence. The high camera angle clearly captured his broad back as he reached stealthily into his own tactical vest pocket, pulled out a small white baggie, and casually tossed it through the open door of her car onto the driver's seat. He waited 2 seconds, reached back in, retrieved the very same baggie, and held it up like a twisted trophy. The silence in the courtroom became absolute, the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb detonating and leaving only vacuum behind. Every person present realized they had just witnessed a horrific felony committed by a man sworn to uphold the law. Elena paused the video on the exact frame of the drugs leaving his hand, suspended in midair. Officer Shaw, she asked softly, the silence amplifying her steady voice. Is that you pulling crystal methamphetamine out of your own vest and planting it in my vehicle? Shaw was hyperventilating, sweat pouring down his face in rivers, ruining his polished exterior. He looked like a trapped animal. That video is altered. It's a sophisticated deep fake. She doctored it. It was subpoenaed directly from the state's secure servers, encrypted and securely hash-coded by the Transportation Department. Elena shot back instantly. Do you wish to perjure yourself further, officer? Or are you finally ready to admit that you are a corrupt, abusive cop who tried to systematically ruin my life simply because I bruised your fragile ego? I am a decorated officer of the law, he roared, losing all control. He stood, pointing a trembling, furious finger at her. You're a smug, entitled little girl who needed to be taught a lesson. You think you can talk back to the police? You think you have rights out there in the dark? I am the law out there. The absolute silence returned, heavier and more terrifying. Shaw stood panting, having just fully confessed his motive on the official record before a horrified judge and jury. Judge Pierce's face was pure, unadulterated fury, knuckles white around his gavel. Officer Shaw, sit down and shut your mouth immediately. If you utter one more single syllable, I will have you physically gagged in my courtroom. The trial did not last another 10 minutes. The prosecutor, looking physically ill, stood and formally withdrew all charges against Elena Vargas on the spot, citing catastrophic failure of evidence and witness credibility. But the judge was not finished. He slammed his gavel down so hard, the wood splintered with a loud crack. Mrs. Vargas, you are free to go with the profound, unreserved apologies of this court and the justice system you aspire to serve. His eyes locked onto the witness stand like lasers. As for you, Mr. Shaw, I have sat on this judicial bench for many years. I have presided over thousands of cases. I have never, in my entire career, seen a more blatant, disgusting, and utterly arrogant display of police corruption, abuse of power, and perjury. Shaw opened his mouth, desperate, but the judge pointed a commanding finger. I said not a single word. Bailiff! 2 large sheriff's deputies stepped forward from the back of the room. Take this man into custody immediately. I am holding him in direct criminal contempt of court. Furthermore, I am formally requesting the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice open an immediate civil rights investigation into Derek Shaw, and I am ordering a full, independent audit of every single arrest this man has made in his career. The remaining color drained from Shaw's face. The arrogant swagger, the bullying smirk, the illusion of supreme power, all evaporated in an instant, replaced by the sheer pathetic terror of a man realizing his life as he knew it was permanently over. The metallic click-clack of heavy steel handcuffs echoed sharply through the quiet room. This time, they were not going on Elena's wrists. The deputies wrenched Shaw's arms roughly behind his back, securing the cold steel tightly enough to bite into his skin, mirroring the pain he had once inflicted on her. As they frog-marched the disgraced officer down the center aisle in a walk of absolute shame, he passed Elena's defense table. His eyes were wild and pleading, desperately searching for any shred of mercy. Elena did not smile. She did not gloat. She did not offer a dramatic parting word. She simply looked right through him as if he no longer existed, calmly organizing her case files and softly closing her laptop. He was nothing to her now, just another closed case file. The aftermath ignited a massive media firestorm. The damning video was leaked to the press and played on relentless loop across national news networks. The police department, scrambling for damage control, immediately fired Shaw and stripped him of his badge and pension. Within weeks, the FBI indicted him on federal charges, including severe deprivation of rights under color of law, felony evidence tampering, and aggravated perjury. Faced with the prospect of decades in federal prison alongside the very people he had once put there, his tough guy bravado shattered completely. He wept during his allocution and accepted a harsh plea deal for a lengthy sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. But the impact reached far beyond one corrupt officer. Because of the comprehensive audit triggered by Elena's case, Numerous prior convictions, based solely on Shaw's fabricated testimony, were thoroughly investigated and overturned. Dozens of innocent men and women, whose lives had been quietly destroyed by his bullying, were fully exonerated and released from prison. As for Elena Vargas, she did not simply return quietly to her paralegal job. The law school administration, learning of her spectacular pro se defense, not only immediately reinstated her, but offered her a full-ride merit scholarship. When she finally walked out of the heavy brass doors of the courthouse that afternoon and stepped into the bright Chicago sunlight, she stopped and drew a deep, unrestrained breath of free air. She had stared down the darkest, most terrifyingly corrupt part of the legal system, a system designed to break her, and she had not blinked once. She had not merely survived, she had won.